when I think about the future of Irish food, I'm always thinking about looking towards Japan, and not only because they're an island, but because of the sea, because of the seaweed, because of the things you mentioned, that kind of focus on presentation, on really taking pride in products. And I was even saying to one of our seaweed growers, I was actually over in Canada, and I was cooking there, and they had actually got, I asked for kombu, and they got Japanese kombu, and it absolutely came wrapped like a golden blanket. And I took a picture and I sent it to one of our seaweed guys, and because it arrives in a black bag for us. And I was like, is there any way you can send in the seaweed looking like this? And he was like, no, not for the moment. So when I think about that attention to detail in terms of the produce and the pride of produce, and we have many growers that are at that level in terms of really focused on getting the maximum flavor out of a tomato or a cucumber or whatever it is, and different varieties. And that's what excites me when I think about food. It's the variety of produce, and I definitely think that that Japanese model is very strong. And not only was it strong at the new Nordic manifesto, but in the kind of post-Nordic environment of it's almost come to dominate it in terms of that flavor of, which is like probably miso, or that flavor, that fermented flavor has completely taken over so much of the new Nordic, and it's almost like that kind of infiltrated into it. And when the last time I was in Copenhagen eating in different places, there was so many of those elements, where something was in a miso, or something was in some type of fermented fish sauce or something like that. So a lot of those ideas are still playing themselves out, and we've really only just touched upon them in Ireland, and there's probably 2 or 3 places doing them at the moment. So there's still a lot of scope and a lot more to do.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, there must be some similarities, I guess. As you mentioned, both being an island, a richness of seaweed, I'm guessing, right? Because
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
isn't necessarily. You've mentioned it a few times, and I was thinking, I guess that's an ingredient that most people wouldn't associate with Irish or European cuisine in general. Let's say. What do you think?
Yeah,
seaweed is probably one of the most sustainable foods, right, that you can eat from the sea. I mean, it's highly sustainable. It's highly nutritious. We've completely overlooked it in European cooking. It's a great source of umami. There's so many kind of benefits of consuming seaweed, both from a sustainability and a nutrition perspective. Why do you think people haven't gotten into it? Is there kind of a history of using seaweed in Irish cooking?
Yeah, like, I mean, there's a history of eating it, like, that goes back to the beginning of people in terms of like eating it out of necessity. And there are some different coastal recipes where people would have cooked seaweed and sustained themselves upon it. There isn't I think the sophistication that the Japanese have. The level the Japanese have taken it to, and I remember talking to Japanese people about this and wondering, like, how come we as an island just seem to overlook the sea? And the Japanese guys said to me, well, to a certain degree, they were forced upon the sea because their land was not good enough, and to a certain degree, we're a victim of our own land, in the sense of we have such good land. I mean, when you think about Ireland, you think about beef and dairy. I think like 92% of our export is beef and dairy. And so one way or other, we literally put all our eggs into the one basket. And it is diversifying now. And like, I feel like we've only started looking at seaweed, and like we've been using it the last 10 years, but there's still like a million other ways to
what ways do you use it? What would you how do you integrate it into, just kind of give people an idea, how would you integrate it into
some are very similar to Japanese. So we would make dashi, or we would make broths with it. We would like make a regular chicken stock but put kelp into it. We would use it fresh, as in like take sea lettuce, dress it, put that with so many different dishes. We would dry it and fold it and use it almost as a spice. And so there's a seaweed, black seaweed that we call sea truffle. It's a kind of peppery seaweed, and we would use that over like sauces and over mayonnaises and stuff like that. So they're probably some of the key ways. We also pickle the seaweed, and we would make we've made some seaweed oils, like where we burn the seaweed and then blend it into oil to get that kind of charred saline flavor. So a lot of different bits and pieces, but there's still I think a lot more a lot more there, and I put some of them into the book. I think wrapping fish in seaweed as well. I really like wrapping fish in kombu, and that's what I was actually doing when I was cooking in Canada. I was wrapping monkfish in kombu in the same way you'd wrap. It almost looked like a beef Wellington, but it was like actually just and then steaming it in the seaweed, so the seaweed flavor goes into the monkfish. So I mean, I think it's really exciting, not only for the reasons you mentioned yourself, like the umami, the vitamin, the mineral content, the sustainability issue. But at the moment, we're still looking at it as if it's someone else's, and we sell a lot of the seaweed that we pick abroad. And I'm sure some of it goes to Japan. Like, we literally just harvest seaweed and particularly kelp out at sea, and it goes off somewhere else. So there's still a lot to look at. And you have probably fourth or fifth generation seaweed farmers in Connemara who are still harvesting seaweed.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So and a lot of times that might have in the last couple of 100 years, seaweed, I suppose the potato replaced seaweed as a crop, and the seaweed was used as a fertilizer because it was so full of nitrogen. But before that, people would actually harvest seaweed as a vegetable and to eat it and grow it. If you talk to some archaeologists on the West, then they'll tell you about like seaweed farms where people actually planted seaweed because
really?
It grows on rocks. Yeah, and they would actually have their little patch heading out to sea and that. So there's probably way more than we even know, because unfortunately there's not a whole lot pile of evidence. It's not like bones or that in terms of archaeology. It's just stones and that. So it's a lot harder to see.